three terrors emerged with the intent of permanent destruction to that civilization. It's as if the forces of darkness had thrown their entire might into the extermination and slavery of this civilization. Powerful pagan pirates pressed from the north. Say that 3 times fast. These warriors were almost twice as large as the average European. Their flatboard ships traversed most rivers of Europe, and some of their Viking ships were spotted all the way to Egypt, killing everyone in their path as good worshippers of Odin. And the marauders often sought Christian enclaves and priests. In fact, most castles of Northern Europe built at this time had the churches inside the wall. Now, some say the Vikings were a rather sophisticated lot for their time. I mean, after all, women could supposedly divorce men and even hold property. However, the Vikings' chronicled rituals contend with this perspective. They're very much over-romanticized in our culture. Let's take a look. Now let's use the 5 metrics that we developed last time and apply it to the Vikings. First up, human sacrifice. Part of the Viking funeral ceremony is where the wife or daughter accompanies the stricken to Valhalla. Okay, that means 1/3 of the man's riches are used for drunken orgies where they gang rape the maiden. Then she is placed on a bed next to the dead, and in a religious ceremony, 6 more men violate her. Then, on top of that, an old woman named the Angel of Death stabs her while men choke her to death. Oh, and then they light the ship on fire. It's hard to imagine a ceremony more satanic, more evil than that. It might be time. What do you think? Do you want to take a break or continue on? I'm with you. All right, let's go. Number 2, tyranny through the worship of leaders. Well, it was central to Viking life. The strongest, most brutal ruled in accordance with Odin, because the victor was deemed the manifestation of Odin on earth, at least until he lost. Leadership, therefore, was always in chaos. Upon a successful challenge, there were massive parties of victory and brutality, simply because the victor could do anything he wanted. Number 3, execution and enslavement of enemies. The European nightmare of the Viking raiders is that they could show up anywhere, anytime. And when they arrived, they plundered, destroying and taking everything, committing the survivors to death by starvation, pestilence, and exposure. And if you weren't killed and weren't left behind, you were enslaved. Number 4, the rejection of moral constraints. For the Vikings, the rejection of such moral constraints is their manifestation of satanic glorification and total brutality and death by the term berserker, which, by the way, is a Viking word that remains intact up to this day, meaning the same thing. This is where a warrior drugs himself into a demonic trance and runs fully armed but naked into the battlefield, out of his mind, killing everything in his path. The interesting thing to know is often he would have to be killed by whichever side won that day. Now, the Viking old-timers will tell you that by the 9th century, the zeal for the gospel message resulted in the finest men of the realm entering the monasteries and being given riches for their work. He would say the state was ready-made for Viking raiders. By 877, Guthrum and the Viking horde had conquered 3/4 of England. And he targeted monasteries, right? That's where the riches were, and you guessed it, no weapons, no army. It was really good pickings. In time, even London had fallen, along with every other jurisdiction, until only the small province of Wessex was left. And its provincial king, age 18, realized he alone was fighting for the very life of England. To save his forces from the immediate onslaught, the king makes a treaty with Guthrum, realizing that we're going to suspend operations for the winter, like every other army. But he didn't realize that the Viking code is to break all treaties. They're considered a sign of weakness. On Christmas, Guthrum attacks Wessex, and the king and only 200 men escape into the swamp. This is where the legend kicks in. The legend says that the king dresses as a commoner, drags himself out of the swamp, and begs a woman to make some hotcakes for him. Foraging, every man for himself. She says no and leaves to tend her animals. So he takes it upon himself to take the flour and bake some cakes for he and his men, burning them in the process. Most women now usually look at their husbands in this case. When she comes back, she's furious. And she starts to berate him and insult him. And just as he's beginning his apology, the knight outside, hearing the commotion, barges in and says, "Woman, do you know who you're talking to? This is King Alfred." And King Alfred is our next connection to our founding fathers. By spring, King Alfred reorganizes his army, and the next 25 years founds the English Navy, sets up coastal fortresses for the people. And King Alfred won a great victory, defeating Guthrum soundly outside of London in the Battle of Weddington. What would you do with a tyrant guilty of marauding, murdering, enslaving thousands of your countrymen? You'd kill him, right? I mean, after all, Charlemagne did that to 4,500 Vikings in just one day. Instead, King Alfred strikes the Peace of Wedmore and converts them, granted, probably not without many options, to Christianity. But it's more than just a technicality, you see, because he becomes their godfather, taking responsibility for their education and discipleship. And the commitment takes years. And he invites the Vikings to come in and take control of the land as long as he is king. Eventually he trusts them, and some of them go back to Daneland. The result? 100 years later, we have Christian King Olaf of Daneland. Faithful to one woman his entire life, he raises 6 sons, training them himself, an original homeschooling dad. His family descendants lead England for 130 years. He translates several texts of the Bible into Anglo-Saxon to give to his people. And what's also important, he's the first to apply just war doctrine, which states war is a last resort, waged against civil authorities, not citizens. It is to redress a wrong, not for personal gain. Reasonable chance of success, no suicide missions. And as victor, be gracious, no revenge. The goal is peace, education, and the reestablishment of civil authority. If you think that sounds like the MacArthur Plan, you're absolutely right. That's where it comes from. The most important contribution of Alfred the Great to our founding fathers was Alfred's development of English common law based upon the Bible. In it, he institutes an entire legal system based upon the teachings of Christ, which later, as we talked about, led to the Magna Carta in 1215, the Sahar Declaration, the English Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, all because King Alfred took the Word of God and applied it. Alfred the Great also provided the strategy that built Western civilization. He said, "I do not want this task before me, but since God hath given it to me, I need 3 types of men. Men who can fight, men who can build, and men who can pray." The impact of King Alfred on civilization is summarized by historian Richard Abel, who writes this.
Alfred found learning dead, and he restored it. Education neglected, and he revived it. The laws powerless, and he gave them force. The church debased, and he raised it. The land ravaged by a fearful enemy, from which he delivered it. Alfred's name shall live as long as mankind respects the past. Historian Richard Abel.
The legacy of Alfred the Great was a moral government, English common law, some 400 years before the Magna Carta. But there is a new terror about to be unleashed, a terror that unfortunately we are all too familiar with today. The terror from the South. In our next installment of A Heritage Lost, the American